Hello everyone, and today we'll be starting with the third part of our chapter 6 Life Processes of Biology of class 10, which is transportation. And transportation by the name itself is very clear that what this process involves. It involves the transfer of different materials from our body like food, oxygen, water, etc. So without any delay, we are quickly starting with transportation in humans at the first, and later we'll learn about the plants. So about the human circulatory system, there are three major components in it. Firstly, the blood, which contains three types of blood cells, RBC, WBC and platelets. And you have learned about every of its function in class 9 and in class 8 and in our previous classes. So basically here we're going to learn about what does blood transfer. Blood transports salts, food, oxygen and waste materials in our body. And blood has a fluid called plasma, as you all know. And this plasma transfers CO2, that means carbon dioxide, food, and the nitrogenous waste. So it's important to remember what these both things transfer. It has a slight variation. The second component of our circulatory system are the vessels, the blood vessels. Vessels are the pathways by which blood travels. And thirdly, we have a pumping unit known as heart, because blood doesn't travel on its own. It needs the pressure by the heart by which it moves to different parts of our body. So basically, heart acts as a pump to our blood and it pushes our blood with great pressure so that it reaches different parts of our body. So now we'll learn about our pump, which is known as the heart. So heart is a muscular organ and it is as big as our left fist. It's not so big, it's small only, but it's as big as our left fist. And this heart has mainly 4 chambers because both the oxygen and carbon dioxide have to transport at the same time. So these 4 different chambers will prevent the mixing of carbon dioxide rich blood into oxygen rich blood, and that's the use of a 4-chambered heart. So basically first I'll explain you how the blood moves from the heart to lungs and to organs, and then we will learn the names of everything. Otherwise, if we try to learn everything combined, you may get confused. So as you have seen here, I have drew a rough and small diagram. So basically there are 4 chambers of the heart, as I told. The upper 2 chambers of the heart are known as atrium, singularly known as atria, and the lower 2 chambers of the heart are known as ventricle. So now our left hand is going to be the right part of the heart, and this is because our heart is, like this inside us. That means we are standing here and our heart is like this. So in this case, our left portion is the left portion of the heart and right portion is the right portion of the heart. But now we are visualizing art by standing in front of it. So our left is going to be the heart's right and our right is going to be the heart's left. So this was the major and basic confusion. So that's done. And now right top part of our heart is known as right atrium. Left top part of our heart is known as left atrium. Right down part of our heart is known as right ventricle. And left down part of our heart is known as left ventricle. If you simply go on listening me, you will get super confused. So it's better concentrate here, see the diagrams and try to learn it yourself. Okay, so now we don't know what is vein, what is artery, nothing. We are going to just see the movement of blood now. So first I'll talk about the oxygen-rich blood that comes from the lungs. As we saw, when from alveoli, the oxygen enters the blood and it goes to different parts. So before going to different parts, it comes to the heart and enters the left atrium, the chamber of the heart, the left upper part chamber of the heart, which is known as left atrium. And from there, from the left atrium, it enters the left ventricle, and from the left ventricle, it moves out through another vessel and it goes to different organs by splitting into various blood vessels. Then again, when different organs and different cells use it, they release CO2 in the same blood, and now this deoxygenated blood enters the right atrium of our heart, and then it goes to the right ventricle, and then from there it comes back to lungs, which is deoxygenated blood, and from lungs it again gets purified by the process of respiration, and again it is released by oxygenated blood. It goes in the left atrium, left ventricle, and followed by that the process repeats. So if you're clear with this simple process that I have told, learning the total function of the heart is very easy for you. Now we have to just name different things. Okay, so are you ready? Let's do it. So oxygen-rich blood from the lungs enters to the left atrium by the pulmonary vein. Pulmonary vein is the only vein that carries oxygenated blood. Okay, so this pulmonary vein carries oxygenated blood from lungs to the left atrium, and from there we have a valve. Now what is this valve? I will tell you about the valve. Valves make the blood flow in one direction because as there are many openings here in the heart, it prevents that the blood goes somewhere else, and it prevents the mixing of the blood, and so it makes our blood flow in one direction. So when pulmonary vein carries oxygenated blood from lungs to the left atrium, and at this time while receiving the blood, left atrium is fully relaxed, and once it gets all its blood, it contracts. Because of the contraction, what happens? The blood in the left atrium gets pushed on by the bicuspid valve here, bicuspid valve, to the left ventricle, which is relaxed in this state because it is receiving the blood from the left atrium. And then when left ventricle gets all the blood into it, it contracts again, which creates a pressure, and the blood from the left ventricle by another valve gets going outside by aorta, which is a type of artery. And then by this aorta the blood moves, and this aorta branches further, and the blood is reached in every cell of our body. Okay, so what did we learn? From lungs, the oxygenated blood is carried by pulmonary vein and it is brought in the left atrium. Then when left atrium contracts, the blood enters the left ventricle by the bicuspid valve, and when left ventricle receives all the blood, it contracts and the blood is pushed in the aorta by another valve which is present here, and this aorta goes further. It divides into arteries, arterioles and capillaries and small blood vessels which go and give blood in every part of the cell in our body. Okay, so now we have completed with half of the heart and now another half is left. So when different cells and organs use the blood, they inject CO2, which is their waste material, into the blood, and now this CO2 is again carried by the blood and it is brought into the heart. And this work of bringing CO2 rich blood or deoxygenated blood into the heart is done by Vena cava, which is another type of vein. And here we have superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. Inferior vena cava brings the blood from the down part of our body, and superior vena cava brings the blood from upper part of our body. So the main thing is that deoxygenated blood is brought in from vena cava, and then it enters the right atrium at the first, and until the right atrium receives all the blood, right atrium is relaxed. Once it receives all the blood, it contracts, and by the tricuspid valve here, a tricuspid valve, this blood is pushed into the right ventricle. And when all the blood is received by this right ventricle again contracts, and by another valve, the blood is moving out through the pulmonary artery, and this pulmonary artery is taking this deoxygenated blood to the lungs for purification. And this pulmonary artery is only the artery which carries deoxygenated blood. So what did we learn in the second half? After different organs use the oxygen in the blood, they inject CO2 in the blood, which is carried by the blood and which is brought into the heart by a vein called vena cava. And through vena cava, this deoxygenated blood enters to the right atrium first, and from there, by a tricuspid valve, it enters the right ventricle, and when right ventricle contracts, it is pumped out through the pulmonary artery to the lungs for purification of the blood. And yes, so there the blood is purified, that CO2 by the respiration process. Again, oxygen-rich blood is brought, and again this oxygen-rich blood from the lungs, it's brought by the pulmonary vein into the left atrium, left ventricle, sent to aorta, different organs use it. Again, this deoxygenated blood is brought by vena cava into the right atrium, right ventricle. Again, it goes through the pulmonary artery to the lungs, and the process continues. If you learn these processes by the help of diagrams, and if you can visualize it in your mind, then this is best for you, because when you visualize something by your own self, it makes us easy to write the way we want. So yes, and we have completed with the transportation in humans. No, before that another part is left of that. You have pulmonary circulation and systemic circulation that is left. So can you tell me what all chambers of the heart are connecting the lung? That means, as we have seen here, the left atrium, oxygen-rich blood is brought to the left atrium by lungs. So yes, first thing is left atrium. And then from the right ventricle, the deoxygenated blood is pumped into the lung for purification. So left atrium and right ventricle are the two chambers which are associated with the lung, which have something linked with the lungs. And so this chain of transport of blood from right ventricle to left atrium is known as the pulmonary circulation. Just understand that pulmonary is something related to lung, then it will be easy for you to remember. And so naturally the two which are left out, that is right atrium and left ventricle, these both do the systemic circulation, we say. And now we have one more part left. What is advantage of having a four-chambered heart? So we had discussed about one of its advantage at the starting, but there are many others, so we'll discuss it right now. Firstly, it prevents mixing of blood. And then secondly, it allows high efficient supply of oxygen to all the body parts. And thirdly, by it, high energy is constantly getting produced, which helps the hot-blooded creatures for maintaining their body. And advantage of having a four-chambered heart is also that double circulation is done. So now what is this double circulation? If I explain this to you in simple words, double circulation means that the blood enters heart twice in one cardiac cycle. Let's again see this older diagram that I had drew for explaining you. So as you can see here, first time the blood enters the heart from lungs, oxygen-rich blood, from left atrium, left ventricle, and then it goes to the organs. And second time the blood enters into our heart, which is deoxygenated blood, which is used by different cells from vena cava, from right atrium, right ventricle, and then it goes to lungs. So blood enters twice in our heart in one purification or one cardiac cycle, we say, and that is why we say it is double circulation. And I hope you're understanding whatever I'm explaining to you. The amphibians, reptiles, except crocodile, have a three-chambered heart, and fishes mostly have two-chambered heart. And this is because fishes are cold-blooded creatures and they don't need much of energy to maintain their body, and so they can tolerate some kind of mixing of their blood. And there's only single circulation that takes place in fishes. That means blood enters heart only once in one cardiac cycle. And there is another fact for you, that fish's heart is known as venous heart because that heart always has deoxygenated blood in it. And I'm not going to explain you how. You take a fish, you take the fish's heart, and you yourself try to make the cycle and understand it, how always fish's heart has deoxygenated blood in it. Okay? So now we'll move to arteries and veins. So these are major two types of blood vessels that are found in our body. So the major differences between both of these are that arteries have thick walls whereas veins have thin walls. This is because when heart pumps the blood in the arteries, arteries have to transport this blood in all the body parts, so they need more. The blood travels by more pressure in the arteries, and if they are not enough thick, they may burst or rupture. So for this purpose they need thick walls, whereas veins just have to bring the blood to the heart, so they don't have much of pressure in it, and so thin walls are enough for them. But these veins have valves in it and arteries do not have the valves. These valves are there in the veins to make sure that the blood flows in one direction. Generally, all the veins transfer blood from all the body parts to the heart, and the arteries transfer the blood from heart to the body parts. So naturally veins are going to have deoxygenated blood in them and arteries are going to have oxygenated blood in them. But we have one exceptional case, as we have seen, the pulmonary vein, which is only the vein which carries blood from lungs to the heart and it carries oxygenated blood. So this is an exceptional case of the pulmonary vein than all the other veins, because this pulmonary vein carries oxygenated blood from lungs to the heart and no other vein does that. Similarly, about the pulmonary artery, we have exceptional case in the case of arteries. As we know, pulmonary artery carries deoxygenated blood from heart to the lungs and it is the only artery which can do that. Clear? So now another topic left here is about the blood pressure. So blood pressure is the pressure which is exerted by blood on the walls of the blood vessels. And naturally, as we have seen, the pressure will be more in arteries than in veins. And here you have to learn two types of pressure, systolic pressure and diastolic pressure. So this systolic pressure is the pressure which is exerted by arteries when heart is contracted. The pressure is more when heart transfers blood to different parts of the body and that pressure is measured as 120. And the diastolic pressure is the pressure exerted by arteries when the heart is in the relaxed state. So pressures will be little low there. So the pressure there is 80. And that's why we say normal blood pressure rate is 120 by 80 mmHg. If we have blood pressure more than this, we call it high BP or hypertension, which is generally caused due to lot of stress and tensions or lack of exercise or wrong eating habits that you practice, etc. So now we have to learn about platelets. As we know, blood has three types of blood cells: red blood cells, white blood cells, and these platelets. So these platelets, they help in the clotting of blood. Anytime you get a hurt, you get a cut, that time it bleeds and then after some time the bleeding stops. So this function is done by platelets to stop the bleeding or to stop excessive loss of blood. So whenever there is any damage internally or externally, I mean outside our body or maybe inside the body parts, these platelets, they form a network on the wound with proteins that stops the blood flow. So they have basically two responsibilities, one to stop the bleeding and other to create a mesh on the wound so that excessive blood loss is not done. And here we'll have one more question to answer. What will happen if the valves are damaged? Valves are what? They are present in the heart and they are present in between the veins to prevent the backward flow of water. I mean blood. So what will happen if these valves get damaged? There will be more chances of backward flow of blood. The blood will be mixed and the blood won't reach heart properly, which can also be fatal. And this condition is called venous insufficiency. With this, we'll quickly start or look over transportation in plants. There are two tissues which are responsible for transportation in plants, xylem and phloem, and they both together constitute the vascular bundle as you had studied in last year. Xylem has 4 subparts and it transports water and minerals in a unidirectional flow, that is from roots to the upper parts of the plant body. Whereas phloem has 5 subparts and it transports food from leaf to the different parts of the body wherever it is needed. And this is a bidirectional flow, as food may go up to the shoot apex and down till the roots. Until the plant is small, single diffusion or simple osmosis is enough for the exchange of food and water, but as the plant size grows, we need a transportation system for efficient transport of these. But as plants are stationary items, they do not move, we don't need a very fast transportation system, and so a slow transportation system is enough in plants. So xylem tissue has 4 subparts, and first we'll look about the xylem tissue. Xylem has xylem parenchyma, xylem fibers, tracheids, and vessels. Among these, tracheids and vessels are the water conducting tissues, and xylem parenchyma stores food and xylem fibers mostly give mechanical support. Now here I will explain you the functioning of this xylem tissue by a diagram, so look properly. So here as you can see, I have drew a magnified roots, and here orange color represents minerals you say, and blue color represents water, okay. So now plant needs minerals and water. So it will apply its root pressure. That means it will use its ATP, the energy that it has, and it will take in the minerals inside the roots by diffusion. And then so what will happen? In roots, the mineral concentration will increase, the solute concentration will increase, and because of which water comes in naturally because of osmosis. So what happens here is when the plant has used its ATP and it has brought the minerals inside the plant, there will be a pressure difference, and so there will be less concentration of water in the roots, so all the water molecules will move into the roots. That's by the natural osmosis process, right? Water moves from high concentration to low concentration. So now we have another thing to learn, that is transportation pull. Now what will happen in this transportation pull is that we have this tree, and as we know many cells are present here, so I have just drew few of them. And now we have to understand that how transpiration helps in transport of water, which is called transpiration pull, because at the surface, because of sun and the heat, what will happen, the water content in the leaf will get evaporated to the atmosphere, and now this particular leaf or this particular cell will not be having any more water content, because of which what will happen, the water molecules from the cell below it, they will go up, they will move up by simple osmosis process, they will go up and they will sit or they will remain there in the top cell. Then here a vacancy will be created, because of which what will happen, the water molecules which are in this cell will move up and go here. Here there will be a vacancy, here there will be a vacancy again. So again what will happen, this water molecule in this cell will go up, and like that, sending all the water molecules up one by one, there will be a vacancy created in the last cell which is near the roots. And so now again what happened, we help the transport of water to move upwards, because we had to do it against the gravity, so we should have been needing more force, and because of transportation it was easy for us to move the water upwards or do the transport of water. And now there's a vacancy in the last cell of the roots, and so now the plant will spend its ATP, and by the osmosis and all, the water will come in finally. And this is what is called the transpiration pull, and transpiration also helps in the temperature regulation of plants. So now let's see about phloem. So this phloem tissue does the transport of food, which is also known as translocation in plants, and you have to remember this. So transport of food is basically done from the leaves to other storage units of the body, because leaves are the kitchens of the plants, and mostly sieve tubes help in the transportation of sucrose from leaves to other storage units. Now what is this sucrose? So here for food we are calling it sucrose, okay? So firstly, phloem, we are going to learn about phloem. Phloem has 5 subparts: sieve tubes, sieve cells, companion cells, sieve plates, and phloem parenchyma. And now we'll see about how the food is transported in phloem. So now when a food unit is formed here, I'll explain you by the diagram, okay? So when a food unit is formed here, what happens is plant uses its ATP, its energy, and it sends this food unit to the nearby phloem tissue. And this phloem tissues, they receive it, basically the sieve tubes which are there. And so what happens in the phloem tissue, naturally the food content becomes more and the solute content increases, because of which water enters this phloem tissue by the nearby xylem tissue by osmosis. It's normal, right? We can understand. Because here now the concentration of sucrose was high and water concentration was low. So by the nearby xylem tissue, water has moved or shifted into this phloem tissue by osmosis. And now this phloem part has a higher concentration of both solute and solvent, and so naturally by the force it is going to move the place where there is low concentration of all this. And if it is needed in this part, they will go and deliver the food there. So this way phloem tissue transports food, which is known as translocation. So with this we have come to an end of transportation in plants. Now we have one small concept which I left while teaching transportation in humans about lymph. So lymph is a similar fluid like blood itself, but blood is red in color and lymph is colorless. There will be many questions regarding lymph that differentiate between lymph and blood, tell two differences and two similarities between lymph and blood, etc. So you have to remember this part. Lymph is a fluid unlike blood, but it is colorless. It has very less proteins in it. So these lymph vessels further divide into lymphatic capillaries, and these lymphatic capillaries, they go in the intercellular spaces in between the blood vessels, because from the blood vessels some amount of glucose, amino acids, water content and all, it escapes from the blood vessels. As the blood vessels are porous, sometimes the content escapes and they go in the intercellular spaces, and because of which these lymphatic capillaries are present there and they reabsorb these things, and finally they join back into a large lymph vessel, and which further joins into the veins. If you remember, we had studied in the nutrition in humans part that in villi we have lacteal, which carries fatty acid and glycerol, and this lacteal is a lymph vessel. So lymph vessels also carry fats and transport it to different parts of the body. These are the main uses, but lymph also performs several other functions, like it helps in the body defense as it is the part of the immune system. Then lymph lacks proteins, as I said, and it is transporting, or it moves very slow as compared to the blood. And the movement of lymph is in a single direction, whereas the movement of blood is in a circular motion. So these were the differences between lymph and blood, and we saw the different functions of the lymph. And so with this we come to an end of the chapter, the topic transportation. And trust me, we have covered 3/4 of the chapter, and now only the 1/4 part, which is the part of excretion, is left. That will be covering soon in the next video. Thank you, and if you liked the video, if you understood what I taught, then do hit the like button, share it with your friends and subscribe to my channel for more such videos. Thank you.